This podcast was created as a supplemental learning resource for this course. The content is based on assigned course materials, including open educational resources, textbook chapters, instructor-developed explanations, examples, and applications connected to course topics. AI tools were used to help transform course material into a conversational podcast format, including the use of AI-generated narration. The AI narration is intended to make the material more engaging, accessible, and flexible for students. However, the podcast should not replace careful reading of assigned materials, reviewing course lectures, or completing course activities. Any interpretations, examples, or explanations included in the podcast are provided for educational purposes and are the responsibility of the instructor. Students should rely on the assigned readings, course lectures, and official course materials as the primary sources for exams, assignments, and class discussions.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. I am so glad you're here. We are going to be tackling something today that is honestly a complete game changer for how you view psychology.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say right up front, I'm a little intimidated. Like, excited, but intimidated.
That is totally valid. I mean, up until this point, we've really been living in a pretty safe, straightforward world. Like we've been looking at simple studies. One variable causes one outcome.
Right, like you flip a light switch and the light turns on. Simple.
Exactly. But if we're being honest, human behavior just isn't that simple. I mean, it's messy. It's complex. Behavior is almost never caused by just one isolated factor.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like nothing in my own life is ever just caused by one single thing.
Exactly. And that is exactly why Chapter 9 of our text is so incredibly crucial. It's all about something called factorial designs. And for you listening, you are a third person in this study group today. By the end of this deep dive, you are going to know exactly how to map out that real-world complexity.
Which is going to be so helpful for our class projects, right? Because I know a lot of us are struggling with how to design something that doesn't just feel, I don't know, too basic.
Totally. You are going to walk away knowing how to read complex research articles, and more importantly, how to design your own multivariable study. So, are you ready to jump into the messiness of it all?
Let's do it. Where do we even start?
Well, before we get into the complex math or the graphs, I think we need to anchor ourselves. We have to review some foundational terms just so we are all speaking the exact same language.
Okay, lay it on me.
So in any experiment, you have your independent variable, right? The IV.
Yeah.
This is the presumed cause. It is the thing that the researcher is actively manipulating or, in some cases, categorizing.
Right, so like giving one group coffee and the other group decaf, the coffee is the independent variable.
Spot on. And then you have the dependent variable, the DV. This is the presumed effect. It's what you are actually measuring at the end of the day.
Okay, so that would be like measuring how fast they run a mile after drinking the coffee.
Perfect. But here is the trickiest part, and it's where so many studies either succeed or fail. It's the operational definition.
Operational definition. I always get a little tripped up on this one. That's how you actually measure the thing, right?
Yes. You have these abstract concepts, right? Like stress or happiness or memory. You cannot just put a ruler up to someone's forehead to measure their happiness. You have to translate that abstract construct into something physical and observable.
So like operationally defining stress as the amount of cortisol in someone's saliva, or just a score on a stress survey.
Exactly. And that translation process is critical. So to really see how this all connects to factorial designs, I want to talk about a specific study from the text. It's from Schnall and her colleagues in 2008.
Oh, is this the one about disgust and moral judgments? I was reading this and it is wild.
It really is. The researchers were asking this big philosophical question. Does feeling a sense of physical disgust actually cause people to make harsher moral judgments?
Which is such a crazy concept to test. But my immediate thought as a student is like, how do you ethically, operationally define disgust in a lab? You can't just, expose participants to toxic waste.
Right. You can't traumatize people. You need a manipulation that is safe, but viscerally real. So their solution was brilliant. They manipulated disgust entirely through the physical environment. The independent variable was room cleanliness.
Okay, so one group gets a clean room, one gets a messy room.
Exactly. The control group took their test in a totally standard, neat room. But the experimental group walked into a room that was engineered to trigger biological disgust. There were dirty, crusty dishes on the table, an overflowing wastebasket.
Oh, and the pen. They had that heavily chewed up pen just sitting on the desk. That detail literally made my stomach turn just reading it.
Which means it worked. That chewed up pen implies saliva, It implies contamination. It is a masterclass in operationalizing mild disgust.
So, okay, the independent variable is the room clean versus messy. What was the dependent variable? How did they measure the harsh moral judgments?
They gave the participants a questionnaire. It described a series of behaviors ranging from mildly unethical to really extreme. Like, one scenario was about failing to return a found wallet, and another one, and trigger warning for you listening, was about someone cooking and eating their own dead dog.
Whoa! That escalated so fast. Why go to such an extreme?
Because if you only ask people about jaywalking, everyone's going to say it's fine. You wouldn't get enough variance in the data. You need scenarios that really force people to make a strong moral calculation.
Okay, that makes sense. So they read the scenarios, and then what?
They rated how acceptable or unacceptable the behavior was on a scale from 1 to 7. That 1 to 7 score is the operational definition of the dependent variable.
Gotcha. But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second. How do the researchers actually know that the messy room made people feel disgusted? Like, what if I walked in there and just thought, wow, this researcher's really disorganized, but I didn't actually feel grossed out?
That is the exact right question to ask. That gets to the heart of construct validity. Are you actually manipulating what you think you're manipulating? You can't just assume the chewed-up pen worked. You have to prove it.
So how did they prove it?
They use something called a manipulation check. Right in the middle of the study, they simply ask participants to rate their current active level of disgust. And the data show that the people in the messy room did, in fact, report significantly higher feelings of disgust than those in the clean room.
Okay, phew. Construct validity secured. So the manipulation worked.
It did. Now, if we stop right there, we would just have a simple single variable study. One independent variable, one dependent variable. But we are here to talk about factorial designs. So the researchers added a second independent variable.
Right, here is where it gets complicated. They added that thing, private body consciousness.
Yes, private body consciousness is this really fascinating psychological trait. It's basically a measure of how much attention you naturally pay to your own internal bodily sensations.
Like noticing your heartbeat or feeling a slight change in your body temperature?
Exactly. Some people are super in tune with their bodies. Others are completely oblivious until they are literally in pain. So the researchers measured this trait using a survey, and they categorized people as either having high private body consciousness or low private body consciousness.
Okay, well, wait. I need to pause here because this is confusing me. I always thought an independent variable had to be manipulated by the researcher, like the clean versus messy room. But they didn't manipulate someone's body consciousness, right? They just measured it. Can we still call that an independent variable?
That is such a good catch. Strictly speaking, in a classical experiment, an IV is manipulated. But in factorial designs, researchers very frequently use what we call participant variables.
Participant variables, meaning traits they already have.
Right. Pre-existing characteristics. Age, personality type, baseline anxiety, or in this case, private body consciousness. We treat these participant variables conceptually as factors in the design. It lets us ask a much cooler question. How does a genuine manipulation, like the messy room, interact with the natural differences people already walk in the door with?
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's how we map the real world, because no one is a blank slate.
Exactly. So now we have a 2x2 factorial design. 2 independent variables, and each has 2 levels. Variable 1 is room, cleanliness levels are clean and messy. Variable 2 is private body consciousness levels are high and low.
Okay, I have the setup in my head. So what actually happened? Did the chewed-up pen cause people to make harsher judgments about the guy eating his dog?
The short answer is yes. Overall, people in the messy room made harsher moral judgments.
Okay, but I feel a but coming.
A huge but. They made harsher judgments, but only if they scored relatively high in private body consciousness.
Oh, wow. Okay, so why does that happen?
Think about it. If you are highly attuned to your body, that gross room actually seeps into your physiology. Your stomach tightens. You feel a little nauseous. And because your brain is constantly monitoring your body, it feels that revulsion.
And then they read the moral scenario, and their brain kind of mixes up the physical disgust with moral disgust.
Precisely. They misattribute their bodily discomfort to the story they're reading. But what do you think happened to the people who scored low in private body consciousness? The people who ignore their bodies?
Well, if they aren't paying attention to their bodies, I guess the room wouldn't affect them. They wouldn't feel the nausea, so their judgments would just be normal.
Bingo. For them, the messy room had zero impact on their moral judgments. Their scores were mathematically identical to the people sitting in the pristine, clean room.
That is wild. The room literally only mattered for half the people.
And right there, we have arrived at the absolute core of Chapter 9. We have discovered an interaction.
An interaction. So how do we define that in, like, textbook terms?
An interaction occurs when the effect of one independent variable depends on the specific level of another independent variable.
It depends. Literally every psychology professor's favorite phrase. Well, it depends.
It is, and we get a bad rap for that, but this study proves why we have to say it. The impact of the room on morality literally depends on your biological awareness. It's not a cop-out. It's scientific precision.
So factorial designs are basically the science of it depends.
Exactly, and once you start looking for them, you see interactions everywhere. Let's look at clinical psychology. Does psychotherapy actually reduce depression?
I mean, I would hope so, generally speaking.
Generally, yes. But let's run a factorial design. Our first 5E is receiving therapy, yes versus no. Our second 5E is the patient's motivation to change high versus low.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. For patients with high motivation, the effect of therapy is massive, huge symptom reduction. But for patients with low motivation, maybe they were forced to go by a spouse, the effect of therapy drops to almost nothing. The therapy's effectiveness depends on the interacting variable of motivation.
So how is this different from what we learned before? Like, what if a researcher just looked at the therapy and ignored the motivation? Or what if they just looked at the messy room and ignored the body consciousness?
That is the danger of what we call a main effect. A main effect is the overall average effect of one variable, completely ignoring any other variables.
So if they just looked at the main effect of the messy room, they would average the high consciousness people together with the low consciousness people.
Yes, and when you average a massive effect together with a zero effect, you end up with a very small, weak overall average. The main effect makes it look like the room barely mattered at all.
Which is completely misleading, because for half the people, it mattered a lot.
It's scientific malpractice, honestly. If you ignore the interaction, you might publish a paper saying, environmental disgust doesn't affect morality. And then the whole world believes a simplified lie. Factorial designs force us to look at the simple effects, the specific effect of one variable at a single level of the other variable.
Okay, conceptually, I'm totally tracking with you. The real world is a web of interactions. But if I'm doing my class project and I have a massive spreadsheet of numbers, how do I actually see this? Looking at raw data is terrifying.
It is terrifying. Our brains are not built to extract complex conditional logic from a spreadsheet, which is why we have to graph the data. Visualizing it is the only way to quickly comprehend how the variables are interacting.
Okay, so let's talk about graphing, because I know I'm going to have to make a graph for my project.
Yeah.
How do we set up the axis?
It requires some strict rules. Let's start with the absolute foundation. The dependent variable, the thing you are measuring, must always go on the y-axis, the vertical axis.
Always.
Always, without exception. So in our Schnell study, the harshness of the moral judgment from 1 to 7 forms the vertical spine of the graph. Higher up means a harsher judgment.
Okay, y-axis is the DV. Got it. That leaves the x-axis, the horizontal one. And we have two independent variables left, cleanliness and body consciousness. Which one gets the x-axis?
You, as the researcher, get to choose. You pick one of your independent variables for the x-axis. Let's say we choose room cleanliness. You put clean room on the left side and messy room on the right side.
Okay, but where does the second independent variable go? The body consciousness.
That second variable is represented inside the graph itself, usually through color coding or different lines. Like you could use a solid blue color for the low body consciousness group and a solid red color for the high body consciousness group. You'd have a little legend on the side explaining the colors.
Okay, I can visualize that. But here's a question I've always had. How do I know which type of graph to use? Like bars or lines? I see both in articles all the time, and I just kind of assumed researchers picked whichever one looked prettier.
Oh, it is definitely not an aesthetic choice.
Yeah.
Graphing is deeply psychological. When you choose a shape, you are actively instructing the viewer's brain on how to interpret reality. The rule comes down entirely to the variable you put on your x-axis.
X-axis variable.
You'll have to ask yourself, is my x-axis variable categorical or is it quantitative?
Categorical meaning distinct buckets, right? Like eye color or treatment versus control.
Exactly. There is no numerical transition between categories. They are separate islands. If your x-axis variable is categorical, you must use a bar graph.
So in the Discuss study, room cleanliness is categorical. You are either in the clean room or the messy room. There's no in-between room, so we use bars.
Yes. You draw a blue bar and a red bar over the clean label, and another blue and red bar over the messy label.
Why can't I use a line graph, though? What's the harm?
If you draw a line, you are hijacking human visual perception. A line inherently implies a continuous journey from point A to point B. If you draw a line connecting the clean room dot to the messy room dot, the viewer's brain subconsciously invents a semi-messy room in the middle of the line.
Oh, like their brain thinks that space represents real intermediate data, but that data doesn't exist.
Exactly. You are tricking the visual cortex into seeing a continuum where only isolated categories exist.
Wow, okay. That is actually really profound. So bar graphs for categorical, what about line graphs?
You use a line graph when your x-axis variable is quantitative, meaning it represents a true, continuous numerical scale, like time, age, or dosage.
Can you give me a concrete example of that from the text?
Sure. Let's imagine a 4x2 factorial design looking at psychotherapy. The first independent variable is the length of therapy, measured quantitatively. 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
Since time is a continuous flow, length of therapy goes on the x-axis, and we use a line graph.
Precisely. The space between week 2 and week 4 actually represents physical time passing. So a line connecting them is mathematically truthful.
And what's the second variable?
Let's say type of therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy versus psychoanalysis. This is categorical, so it becomes the lines themselves. A solid blue line tracks the CBT patients over the 8 weeks, and a dotted red line tracks the psychoanalysis patients.
That makes perfect sense. You can visually trace the journey of the two different therapies over time.
Exactly. Now, once we have the graph built, we are looking for interactions. And there are two very specific visual patterns you need to be able to spot instantly: the spreading interaction and the crossover interaction.
Spreading and crossover. Let's start with spreading. What does that look like?
Imagine looking at a bar graph. On the left side, at level 1 of your x-axis, the blue bar and the red bar are exactly the same height. There is zero difference between them.
Okay, I see it.
Now move your eyes to the right side of the graph, level 2. The blue bar stays low, but the red bar shoots dramatically upward. The gap between the two colors has suddenly spread apart.
Wait, that is exactly what happened in the Schnall Discuss study, isn't it?
Yes, let's map it.
Hmm?
On the left side, we have the low body consciousness group. For them, the clean room bar and the messy room bar are identical. No difference in moral judgment.
But on the right side, for the high body consciousness group, the clean room bar is low, but the messy room bar spikes way up. The gap spreads.
Exactly. The spreading pattern tells you immediately. The room had zero effect under one condition, but a huge effect under the other condition.
Okay, I love that. It's so visually clear. Now, what about the crossover interaction? What would it look like if the effects were totally flipped, like an X on a line graph?
You nailed it. A crossover interaction forms a literal X in the middle of your chart. It means the independent variable has an effect at both levels, but the effects go in exact opposite, contradictory directions.
Can you give me an example of what that would look like in an actual study?
Let's build a scenario. Imagine we are testing how caffeine dosage impacts test scores. DV on the y-axis is the test score. Quantitative x-axis is caffeine dose, from 0 milligrams on the left to 300 milligrams on the right.
So we use lines because dosage is quantitative.
Right, and our second variable is a participant variable. Personality type, extroverts versus introverts. Let's plot the extroverts with a solid blue line. At 0 caffeine, they score a 70. But at 300 milligrams, the stimulant helps them focus, and their score climbs to a 95. The blue line slopes steeply up.
Makes sense. Caffeine helps extroverts. What about introverts?
We plot them with a dotted red line. At baseline, 0 caffeine, they already have plenty of internal stimulation. They score 95. But given 300 milligrams of caffeine, and their nervous system gets overloaded, they get anxious. Their score plummets down to a 70. The red line slopes steeply down.
And boom, the lines cross in the middle, a giant X.
Exactly. And let's connect this back to why main effects can be so dangerous. If a researcher ignored personality, what is the overall main effect of caffeine in this study?
Well, the extroverts gained 25 points. The introverts lost 25 points. So they average out to 0.
Yes. The main effect is mathematically 0. The researcher would conclude that caffeine has no impact on test scores.
Which is totally wrong. It had a massive impact on everyone, just in opposite directions.
Exactly. A crossover interaction can completely hide a massive effect if you only look at the average. Imagine if this was a medical trial for a new drug. You might throw away a miracle cure just because it works perfectly for one genetic group but harms another, and the average looks like 0.
Wow, okay. That is honestly kind of scary. Like, how much science have we misunderstood because researchers didn't look for an interaction?
It is a sobering thought, for sure, which is why learning this research methods thinking is so critical. So let's bring this down to the student level. If you, listening right now, are designing a simple study for a class project, how do you use this?
Yeah. How do we build a basic 2x2 factorial experiment without losing our minds? Because my first instinct is like, I want to study everything. I want to look at caffeine and sleep and music and time of day all at once.
The more is more fallacy. I totally get it. You think if a 2x2 is good, a 3x3x3 must be incredible.
Right. Why not a 3x3x3?
Let's do the math on the trade-offs.
Yeah.
In a standard 2x2 design, you have 4 distinct conditions, 4 groups of participants. If you want 30 people per group to have decent statistical power, you need 120 people total. That's a lot, but doable for a dedicated student.
Okay, 120 people. I can probably annoy enough of my classmates to get that.
But let's look at your 3x3x3 design. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. You have created 27 distinct subgroups.
Oh, no.
And if you need 30 people per group, you now need 810 participants. Your class project just turned into a multi-year grant-funded nightmare.
Okay, scratch that. Keep it simple. 2x2 it is.
Yes. Keep it simple, but choose your variables wisely. Remember that context is everything. Participants do not evaluate your variables in a vacuum.
What do you mean by that?
Let me bring up a classic study by Michael Birnbaum from 1999. It perfectly shows why context matters. He did a between-subjects study where he asked people to rate the magnitude of a number on a scale from 1 to 10.
Rate how big a number is.
Yes. One isolated group was asked to rate how large the number 9 is. A completely different isolated group was asked to rate how large the number 221 is.
I mean, obviously 221 is bigger.
You'd think, but look at the data. The group rating the number 9 gave it an average score of 5.13. The group rating 221 gave it an average score of 3.1.
Wait, what? They rated 9 as bigger than 221. How is that even possible?
Because of implicit context. The group rating the number 9 subconsciously compared to other single-digit numbers. And compared to 1 or 2, 9 is huge.
Oh, I get it. And the group rating 221 compared it to other 3-digit numbers like 800 or 900. So 221 felt small.
Exactly. Because the groups were isolated, they brought their own context. If you are designing a factorial study, you have to be so careful about how participants interpret your variables.
So what mistake might a student make here when setting up their first factorial design?
The most common mistake is weak operationalization. If your manipulation doesn't genuinely impact the participant, your whole interaction falls apart. You have to ensure construct validity.
Can you give me a gold standard example of doing it right?
Absolutely. Think back to the Darley and Latane study on the bystander effect from the 1960s.
Yeah.
They wanted to see if the presence of other people reduces helping behavior in an emergency.
Right, the diffusion of responsibility.
Exactly. Now, a lazy operational definition of an emergency would be giving someone a survey that says, imagine someone twisted their ankle. Would you help?
Yeah, because everyone is going to check yes on a survey. It's not real.
Right. So Darley and Latane engineered a visceral reality. They put participants in a room with an intercom. The independent variable was the number of other voices the participant thought were on the line. And the operational definition of the emergency was a meticulously acted audio recording of someone having a severe epileptic seizure over the intercom, begging for help.
Oh my gosh, that is so intense.
It is. But that is how you guarantee construct validity. The emergency was so undeniably real that measuring whether the participant left the room to help was a true measure of human behavior. If your class project has weak, anemic manipulations, any interaction you find is just meaningless noise.
That really puts it in perspective. You need your version of the chewed-up pin or the intercom seizure. But let me ask you a realistic student question. Why does this matter if I'm just designing a class study? Like, I'm not publishing in a journal. I'm just trying to pass research methods.
I hear that all the time. And it matters because of the principle of converging evidence. No single study is perfect. Every study has flaws or third variables. But learning factorial designs rewires your brain to think critically.
Like, it trains you to look for the nuance.
Exactly. It trains you to rule out third variables, to understand cohort effects, and to realize that science isn't about proving something with 100% certainty. It's about building a web of conditional truths. When you see a news headline that says, coffee causes anxiety, a trained brain automatically asks, wait, for whom? Under what conditions?
It's like a defense mechanism against bad information.
Exactly. So let's do a quick breather and consolidate everything we've talked about today. We've covered a lot of ground. Let's do our 5 major takeaways from Chapter 9.
Okay, I'm ready.
Number 1, factorial designs study the effects of 2 or more independent variables at once. They capture real-world complexity.
Number 2, an interaction means the effect of one variable fundamentally depends on the level of another variable. It depends.
Perfect. Number 3, main effects look at the overall average impact of one variable, ignoring the others, and they can be dangerously misleading if an interaction is present.
Number 4 is about graphing. Graphing choices depend entirely on your x-axis data. Line graphs for quantitative variables, bar graphs for categorical variables.
Spot on. And number 5, spreading and crossover interactions show different visual ways that variables depend on each other, fanning out or colliding in an X.
I feel like I actually understand this now.
Let's test that. Let's do 5 quick quiz-style review questions. You ready to be in the hot seat?
Bring it on.
Question 1. What was the dependent variable in the Schnall-Messy room study?
That was the harshness of the moral judgments measured on a 1 to 7 scale.
Correct. Question 2. If your x-axis variable is categorical, like day versus night, what type of graph should you use?
Categorical means separate buckets, so you must use a bar graph.
Yes. Question 3. What do we call it when an independent variable has an effect at both levels, but in opposite directions?
That is the giant X, the crossover interaction.
Nailed it. Question 4. True or false? Participant characteristics, like private body consciousness, can be used as independent variables in a factorial design.
True. They are called participant variables, and we treat them as factors even though we don't manipulate them.
Exactly. And final question. What is the main benefit of a factorial design over a simple experiment?
It allows researchers to see if the variables interact, which actually reflects the complexity of the real world.
Perfect score. Now, for you listening, I have 3 reflection questions for you to apply to your own class project.
Grab a notebook, everyone.
1. Think about your own research project idea. What is a second independent variable you could add to make your study a 2x2 design?
If you added that second variable, what would a spreading interaction logically look like in your specific study?
How will you operationally define your variables to ensure high construct validity, just like the researchers did with the messy room? What is your chewed-up pen?
Those are really good questions. I'm definitely going to use those for my project outline tonight.
I am so glad. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to just kind of mull over.
Ooh, I like provocative thoughts.
We established that if you ignore an interaction, you miss the truth, right? Like the Kathleen crossover.
Right.
Well, if every psychological phenomenon truly depends on multiple interacting factors in the real world, is it ever actually possible for a single scientific study to tell the whole truth? Or is psychological science just an endless, beautiful process of uncovering the next layer of interaction?
Wow. That actually breaks my brain a little bit, in a good way.
It's what keeps us in business as researchers. Keep questioning the world, keep looking for the it depends, and thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.